They don't have any evidence to show that. The Shudra kings who are worshipping the feet of Vishnu. I will not say daughter because the contribution. The question becomes slightly more complicated when you ask the argument that it's always skewed in favor of one particular community is wrong. It is not an innocent version of history at all. It is a motivated version meant to create a certain outcome. Caste has a very specific, let's say, connotation. Jati and Varna are unnecessarily and without basis conflated with caste. Citing scholarly literature, especially Nicholas Dirks, I have pointed out that the word caste comes from casta, which is Portuguese. And why Portuguese? Because they were the first, among the first colonizers, not the British. And therefore, the role played by the missionaries, which is both the Portuguese as well as the French, in recording or let's say creating an ethnography of Bharat, and how that ultimately becomes useful to the British establishment in creating divide is something represented. Now, let's answer the straight question that you've put. Does the existence of Jati and Varna prior to the entry of the colonizer not point to discrimination? I would clearly make the statement that it translates to stratification. It does not translate to discrimination. Stratification is not the same as discrimination. Nobody has been able to conclusively prove that the concept of untouchability has existed in 5,000 years or 7,000 years. They don't have any evidence to show that. What is the timeline from which untouchability starts, and how you end up conflating the treatment of Shudras with the treatment of untouchability or the treatment of untouchables, fundamental flaw in the argument. Shudras were not untouchables. They are not supposed to be treated as untouchables. That's not the argument at all. You've had Shudra kings. You have stone inscriptions where even Reddys call themselves as Shudra kings who are worshipping the feet of Vishnu. And therefore they'd be treated as Shudra Kshatriyas, SK. So it's not Chaturvarna entirely, it translates to 16 classifications. Which is to say, maybe you're born in a particular community, but when it comes to your conduct, you perhaps don't share the traits of that particular community, and therefore you will be again put under its BB, BK, BV, BS. Similarly, you will have a KB, KK, KV, so on and so forth. That's exactly how the stratification works. Now, when you look at the way the professions or vocations have been divided between communities, you're looking at a pre-industrial age where across the world, for all practical purposes, professions have been generational and hereditary in nature. It's not just the priestly profession. The vocation of the father continued to be the vocation of the son. Largely, I will not say daughter, because the contribution of the female workforce was largely missing at that particular point. So when you're looking at a pre-industrial age, you're also looking at not just, let's say, not too much of cross-pollination between communities in terms of professions. You're also looking at the serious absence of the female workforce except in the farming community. Okay. Both these, let's say, issues have to be handled hand in hand. Second, we constantly speak of the inability of any other community to enter, let's take the bull by its horns, the Brahminical professions. But why don't we ask the question, was it easy for the Brahmin to enter other professions? No wonder that travelogues are written specifically to show that while there is a Chaturvarna system, notionally they say there is a Brahmin in each profession, which is to say that there is a person who is recognized as the expert in each subject, and no other person is expected to or is permitted to enter that particular profession. It's not limited to one particular priestly profession. You look at, let's say, the concept of Vishwakarmas, you look at the concept of any other community for that matter, Padmashalis, weavers, so on and so forth. The idea is to divide labor. Now, the question becomes slightly more complicated when you ask whether it is relevant to the current day. In an industrialized age, would this make sense? Does this, let's say, this rigidity make sense? For all practical purposes, it has come down to only 2 or 3 societal transactions where this still has some kind of relevance. Marriage at best. To the best of my knowledge, it has never made a difference to friendships in my life. I don't know about others, right? Now, people might say, well, there are certain power structures which are invisible. That's the standard Marxist trope, that there is a language of power, there's a system of power, so on and so forth. You know what? I agree with you. I don't disagree with you. But your argument that it's always skewed in favor of one particular community is wrong. Because power traditionally is a function of holding of land and real estate. And therefore, landowning communities have wielded the most amount of power. And as far as the non-landowning communities are concerned, it's a question of whether they're seen as the protector of Vedas or so on and so forth, and therefore a certain degree of respect is given to them. In your argument, there is something very crucial that I think is that needs to be explained. I'm just trying to unpack as many layers as possible, so I hope people don't think that I'm trying to evade it. What was kept out of the reach of any other community other than the Brahmin community is not education, is only the ability to study the Vedas and to disseminate it. Not worship, not temple access, not all of these issues. That particular aspect of practicing it and disseminating it was limited to one particular community. Now, assuming for a moment that you believe that this is wrong, it should not continue today, the fact of the matter is, folk traditions are still hereditary in nature. You can't have cross-pollination folk traditions as well. They are still hereditary in nature. That clearly shows that each of these traditions have been hereditary in nature, and perhaps for that particular reason, they've survived still. Because there is a continued investment of certain families in each of these traditions. Okay, let's ask the most economic, blunt, industrial, capitalistic question. When it is possible for someone to simply acquire modern education, climb up the social ladder and go to California, what is his or her benefit in a continuously vilified atmosphere to take up the study of the Vedas to the extent that your visible symbols of a practitioner or a, let's say, or a student of Veda constantly attracts only ridicule and attacks? What is your incentive to pursue this? Okay, next question. After, let's say, the study of the Vedas have been freed from the clutches of the evil Brahmin, how many people have chosen to, let's say, surrender to that particular tradition? Most importantly, the caste discourse in this country needs a diversity and plurality. And there have always been a plurality of voices which have tried to argue against discrimination staying within the Hindu fold as opposed to seeking to destroy it. Unfortunately, those voices don't find place in textbooks. Where people have said, we are not fighting for the abolition of caste or the annihilation of caste, we are fighting for equal treatment and equal respect despite staying within our caste fold. Now, those arguments don't find any representation at all, because those arguments are inconvenient arguments because they show Hindu unity. They show the urge to remain in this particular fold. They don't show the urge to destroy this particular fabric. Now, obviously, you can't present it. Why would a Marxist present it? He is not related to me. He has no love lost for Hinduism. He is not going to present it. So, I think the job that people like me have taken upon ourselves is we have been showing only one side of the coin, and that too, it's a heavily fabricated and distorted version of the coin, which have sat and created in a few universities. Let's bring the evidence to the public record first. Again, one thing that I would certainly want to caution you about is that I'm not asking for dissing of all sorts of Western academy on Hinduism. I'm not saying that, because a lot of people have done justice to Indology. They may not share your commitment or your dedication to Hinduism because they're not Hindus. But in terms of presenting the evidence, they've done a fantastic job of it. So one of the reasons that I cited Nicholas Dirks is that he takes up caste as an issue, and for over a decade he has worked on it. So 92 to 2002 he has worked on it. He has cited he's published multiple papers, but all of his efforts culminate into this brilliant book called Castes of the Mind. And the reason why the book is titled Castes of the Mind, anybody who's followed the caste discourse and the politics of caste in this country will tell you this. It is said that caste emanates from Purusha Suktam, and therefore it is the creature of Brahma's thinking. And therefore the title of the book is Castes of the Mind. So that is the allusion to the title of the book. So try and read up this literature. I am 100% sure that I don't have all the answers, but I'm certainly saying that the skewed oppressor-oppressed version, the class war version that the Marxist continuously pushes everywhere across the board, is not an innocent version of history at all. It is a motivated version meant to create a certain outcome. And the effects are visible in all humanities departments.